Hello again. This is Jerry Smith, pastor of Salem Baptist Church, with a devotional intending to prepare us for our worship services tomorrow. As we have been doing the past several weeks now, our services will be FM drive-in style, designed and prepared so that everyone stays in their vehicle for the entire service and tunes into FM 107.3 in Salem's parking lot. Our first service is at 10 a.m. tomorrow, and our second worship service is at 11:10 a.m. We hope to see you tomorrow. Now let's return to the book of Daniel, chapter 9. I want to talk about three things from this passage, and all of it is under the fact that God is in control. God is in control in everything, isn't He? We learn this from the book of Daniel and throughout God's Word. I want to talk about three things. Seek to find His will and follow. Learn to consider that our days are numbered. Remember how greatly loved we are. We learn all of this from the book of Daniel and throughout God's amazing Word. Daniel chapter 9, verses 20 through 23 say, "Now while I was speaking, praying, and confessing my sin and the sin of my people Israel, and presenting my supplication before the Lord my God for the holy mountain of my God. Yes, while I was speaking in prayer, the man Gabriel, whom I had seen in the vision at the beginning, being caused to fly swiftly, reached me about the time of the evening offering. And he informed me and talked with me and said, O Daniel, I have now come to give you skill to understand. At the beginning of your supplications, the command went out, and I have come to tell you, for you are greatly beloved. Therefore consider the matter and understand the vision." I want us to consider how Daniel prepared in seeking to find God's will and how determined he was to follow God's will. Verse 20 again says, "Now while I was speaking, praying, and confessing my sin and the sin of my people Israel, and presenting my supplication before the Lord my God." As Daniel sought the Lord's will, he did so in prayer, in confessing his sin, the sin of his people, and he in that way sought the Lord's will and asked the Lord. In fact, Daniel was about year 67 in the 70 years of captivity, somewhere around that time. And he was praying to God, as we've talked about, that God return his people from the captivity for God's glory. We know that Daniel's motives were pure because he immediately received an answer, as we see in this passage. In fact, it says in verse 21, "Yes, while I was speaking in prayer, the man Gabriel," the angel Gabriel appeared in the form of a man. He said, "Whom I had seen in the vision at the beginning, being caused to fly swiftly, reached me about the time of the evening offering." I like the bracketing of that, the time of Daniel's prayer before he had, while he was still speaking in prayer, about the time of the evening offering. We see that Daniel had developed great habits as he sought to find God's will and to always follow God's will. I want us to also think about learning to consider that our days are numbered. An acquaintance of mine working in Fukuoka, Japan as a missionary wrote in his most recent newsletter, "At the beginning of the year, I was asked to write out some detailed yearly goals for 2020. While I sat down to do this, my mind went immediately to James 4:13 through 15. Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow, we will go to such and such a city, spend a year there, buy and sell, and make a profit, whereas you do not know what will happen tomorrow. For what is your life? It is even a vapor that appears for a little time and then vanishes away. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we shall live and do this or that." My pastor missionary friend said, "This passage weighed heavily on me as I work through this assignment of laying out His goals for the year. I honestly considered prefacing every single goal with the statement, if it is the Lord's will, I will live and do this. He writes, we presume too much. This present crisis has brought me back to this same passage. And he talks about the things that were canceled. And it made me think of the things that have been canceled this year. We are indefinitely postponing Boones Creek Baptist Camp this summer. I, on my business trips, have already canceled trips to Japan, to Italy, to Germany, to Slovenia. We all have things that we had planned that have not at all come to fruition. And we want to remember that God is in control, and we need to seek to find His will and follow, if it is the Lord's will. This all reminds me that at the end of 2019, in a message I preached on the last Sunday in December, we talked about vision for the year. And in this case, I used vision as V, victory, I, our interdependence, S, sight, that the Lord make us able to see, I, introspection, that we consider our walk with the Lord, O, outreach, and N, newness. We spent several weeks going over this, talking about this, using passages to think about vision. It's been truly remarkable to see how this year has turned out so far in ways that we could not know and could not have predicted, but the Lord does. And so we want to always seek to find His will and follow. My missionary friend talks about a friend of his who recently wrote an article entitled, Why Did I Even Buy a 2020 Planner? That's a great title for an article this year, isn't it? We take too much for granted, so much for granted, he writes, even our life and health. And he reminds us of what Moses said in that beautiful Psalm 90. Teach us to number our days aright, that we may gain a heart of wisdom. The second thing that I want us to think about is learning to consider that our days are numbered. As we think about God's plan and His purpose for our lives, as we think about the urgency of sharing the gospel, as we think about the gifts and talents that He has given us and how He wants us to use them, whatever the circumstances are, I want us to always remember to learn to consider that our days are numbered. We want every day to count. We want every day to be for God's glory, don't we? Finally, I want us to remember how greatly loved we are. Daniel was reassured of that. We look at verses 22 and 23 again. The scriptures say in Daniel chapter 9, and he informed me and talked with me, that was Gabriel, and said, O Daniel, I have now come forth to give you skill to understand. At the beginning of your supplications, the command went out, and I have come to tell you, for you are greatly beloved. Therefore consider the matter and understand the vision. Think about being greatly beloved. Think about, as Daniel was praying, it says, Gabriel told him, at the beginning of your supplications, the command went out, and I have come to tell you. I want to remind you how greatly loved you are. You know, despite these circumstances, we want to remember that we live in the day of salvation. I've been talking about this in the devotionals for weeks now. We are greatly loved. If we're a believer, we have this great verse in 1 John 3, chapter 1. Behold, what manner of love the Father has bestowed on us, that we should be called children of God. Wow, children of God. What manner of love the Father has bestowed on us. And John goes on to write, therefore the world does not know us because it did not know Him. And for those who have not yet come to a believing faith in Jesus Christ, a confessing faith, I would remind that Jesus said in John chapter 3, verse 16, For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. Let's remember how greatly loved we are, even in this time. Let's remember to seek God's will and follow. If it is the Lord's will, we will live and do this or that. Let's remember to learn to consider that our days are numbered. Teach us to number our days aright, that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Thank you.